Hip, hip, hooray for DNA. It provides the key to the plans for making everything in you and me.
Welcome to another past HSC exam question videos. While doing this video, we'll cover this exam question, which comes from the Chromosome and Inheritance chapter of the Blueprint of Life module. While doing the second, I'll read the question. Once you've read the question, you have about 5 seconds to pause the video. Once you pause the video, attempt the question, then press play when you're ready. The question itself says, the diagram shows 2 steps of the process of meiosis occurring in a cell with 4 chromosomes. And what you should know, we've got these 2 different types of chromosomes, and here we've got A, B, A, B written in capital letters. Here we have A, B, A, B written in undercase letters. Here we have E, D, E, D written in undercase letters. And here we have E, D, E, D written in uppercase letters. And then with this process here, and then here we have A, B, A in uppercase, but we have a B in lowercase. Here we have A in uppercase, in lowercase, or A in lowercase, B in lowercase, and 1 uppercase B. Here we have E in uppercase, 1 D in uppercase, and 1 D in lowercase. Here we have E in lowercase, 1 D in lowercase, and 1 D in uppercase. So that's our actual diagram. A, describe the behavior of the chromosomes between the steps shown, that's worth 2 marks. B, list 4 possible combinations of alleles that would be found in the gametes resulting from this process, that's worth 2 marks. And C, explain 1 advantage of the process of meiosis to the species, that's worth 2 marks. So when you're ready, press pause and attempt the question. Welcome back. Right, so it says describe the behavior of chromosomes between the steps shown. So what you should have realized is that here they're homologous uncrossed over versions, and they're all sort of at random places. Whereas here they have lined up next to each other, so they've lined up. The 2 different pairs of chromosomes have lined up, and as you can see, there's been a swap. So these have swapped. This big B used to be on the other side, and small b used to be on the other side. So these have swapped, and these have swapped. And so what I wrote is just that we have a lining up the equator which has happened. That's one thing that has happened, and also that there was a crossing over that has happened as well. So I wrote the chromosomes line up at the equator. That's the first part. And crossing over occurs. That's the second part. And then I just quickly explain what crossing over was, which is where segments of the chromosomes are transferred at points where the pairs of chromosomes meet. We mentioned these 2 points, and that's worth about 2 marks. So one for mentioning the lineup and the other one for the crossing over. 2 marks out of 2. And the second part was list 4 possible combinations of alleles that would be found in the gamete resulting from this process. So remember, these will break up, and we will only get each gamete will get one of the E and Ds, so one of the E and Ds, and one of the A and Bs. Obviously in any kind of combination, but they'll have one of these and one of these chromosomes. So they'll take one of, for example, this half, or this half, or this half, or this half. They only will get half of the these pairs. As the actual combinations would be, these are 4 possible combinations. There could be more possible combinations, but these are 4. So for example, it could get A and B. So let's say it could get this chromosome here in the gamete, and E and D in capital letters. So this one up there, and this one here, this one. But it could also get A capital and B small, so that would be this one here, this chromosome. And E and D all undercase, which would be this chromosome. It could get A and B undercase, which would be this chromosome. And E uppercase and D lowercase, which would be this chromosome. It could get A and B A undercase and B uppercase, which would be this chromosome. And it could get E undercase and D uppercase, which would be this chromosome. But yeah, I mean, these are just four. There's more possible combinations. But I mean, the gist should be that you get one of the A and Bs, and it could be any of the combinations of the different types of alleles, but one of the A and B, and one of the E and D chromosomes. And remember, because it's haploid, we don't get both of them, we only get one of them. And that's would be in your half mark for each. So half, and half. 2 out of 2 in total. Again, if you didn't have these combinations, but just different types of combinations that were possible, you would also got your marks. These are not the only possible combinations, but just 4 of the possible combinations. The last point was explain one advantage of the process of meiosis to these species. So for the last one, what I talked about was that meiosis increases variation. But that won't get you full marks yet, because you still have to link variation to why variation is actually a good advantage. So then I said that variation is good for natural selection. So variation is good for natural selection. And that would get you your full marks. So first we said that it increases variation, and then we say that variation is good for natural selection. So what I wrote is meiosis leads to greater variation in offspring due to independent assortment and crossing overs. Again, this is just mentioning that meiosis leads to greater variation in the offspring. That gets your mark. But you should have also mentioned why that variation is important. Greater variation in the species allows for a higher degree of selection to occur, meaning natural selection, which is favorable for a species that has to adapt to a changing environment. So remember, if we're all the same, we could, for example, take a pest, for example. If there's a really bad virus, and we all have exactly the same genes, then if we are all really immune, not immune to that virus, but if we're all really going to get that virus because our immune system doesn't fight it, then every single member of that species would die. But if there's variation, that would mean some would die, whereas others might be immune and they won't die. So the more variation there is, the more chance there would be that some will keep on surviving, the ones which have the favorable traits, whereas the other ones would lose out and die. So having more variation is good for species, because that means the species can survive even if there's changing environments. And that will also get you a mark. So this is 2 marks out of 2. And where does this question come from? It came from these dot points. Explain the role of gamete formation and sexual reproduction in the variability of offspring. And explain the relationship between structure and behavior of chromosomes during meiosis and the inheritance of genes. Right, so we have C came from this dot point, C came from this dot point, whereas B and A came from this dot point. I hope that was useful.
Thank you for watching.